very warm welcome to this special edition of Rajya Sabha Television on India's trade relationship with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Year 2017 is a landmark year in ties between India and Asean countries as India celebrates 25 years of dialogue, partnership and trade with the bloc. In fact, during his recent visit to Manila at the ASEAN summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi exhorted the business community to invest in India. Let's take a look at how the India-ASEAN relationship evolved over the years and where it stands in today's changing global scenario.
A music and dance excerpt from the musical drama Hari, based on the characters of the Ramayana, marked the grand opening ceremony of the 31st ASEAN Summit in Manila. An epic narrative that is a shared heritage among the ASEAN member states. India and the Southeast Asian nations have a long history of friendship and cooperation that dates back centuries. Driven by cultural and geographical proximity, this friendship has promoted strong diplomatic relations. And showcasing economic reform initiatives of the government, Prime Minister Narendra Modi invited the ASEAN countries to ramp up investment in India and said the task of transforming the country is proceeding at an unprecedented scale. Prime Minister enunciated that India wants to build land, sea and air connectivity to this dynamic region and that work is already on in the construction of the trilateral highway through Myanmar and Thailand to connect to other countries in Southeast Asia.
भारत की एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसी आसियान को ध्यान में रखकर ही बनाई गई है और इंडो पैसिफिक रीजन के क्षेत्रीय सुरक्षा परिदृश्य में इस संगठन का महत्व बहुत ही स्पष्ट है। तीसरे आसियान इंडिया प्लान ऑफ एक्शन के अंतर्गत आपसी सहयोग के हमारे विस्तृत एजेंडा की प्रगति अच्छी रही है, जिसमें पॉलिटिको सिक्योरिटी, इकोनॉमिक तथा कल्चरल पार्टनरशिप के 3 महत्वपूर्ण पहलू शामिल हैं।
A shared desire for prosperity, freedom and friendship brought together 10 Asian countries in the 1960s. They formed the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and at the core of their agreement that they signed on 8th August 1967 was the desire to promote a pan-Asia presence. This common Asian identity was sought to be strengthened through mutual assistance in diverse fields, from economy to politics, military, education, and of course, culture. The organization that started with Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand as its founder members expanded over the years to include Brunei, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. The principal aims of the members remain the same: accelerating economic growth, social progress, and socio-cultural evolution, while at all times protecting regional stability. India's engagement with ASEAN started in 1991 with its Look East policy. It became a sectoral dialogue partner of the organization in 1992 and a full dialogue partner in 1996. In November 2001, the ASEAN-India relationship was upgraded to summit level. The Act East policy was formally initiated at the ASEAN-India East Asia Summit in Myanmar in 2014. This placed East Asia at the core of India's Act East policy and at the center of India's efforts to ensure an Asian century. Over time, this association gained political, strategic, and cultural dimensions.
If you compare it to the EU, for example, where growth rates have stagnated, here is a bloc that is doing very well compared to other parts of the world. So I think if you have to keep on leveraging their growth, which was the intended sort of policy of Look East when it was started, I think we have to keep on engaging ASEAN at a level which perhaps we are not doing, because that's where China is doing much more effectively. And so therefore, despite the fact that we claim to be now acting East, I think China is there as a power because it has understood the economic argument of the relationship, that unless you get your economics right with ASEAN, you won't be able to become a security provider, and that's something that India will have to work with, and there is a lot of demand for India.
The India-ASEAN Agreement on Trade and Services was signed on 12th November 2014. It was the first comprehensive agreement that India entered into with ASEAN countries as a bloc. The investment agreement tries to remove barriers of foreign investment flows between India and the ASEAN countries. It also aims at promoting a bilateral investment regime to promote economic growth, development, and regional integration. But problems still remain in achieving these goals. According to the Standing Committee on Commerce, despite the implementation of the India-ASEAN Trade and Goods Agreement, some ASEAN countries haven't yet ratified agreements on services and investments. The committee hopes the government will make efforts to get them ratified at the earliest.
We have to look at new markets, be it the ASEAN countries, be it Africa. These are new markets which are booming. That is where Indian exports must take place. The traditional markets are saturated now. Also, as you can see, whether it is under President Trump or other countries, they are putting import barriers. So we have to find new markets, and this is a natural fit for India.
India's trade and cultural relations with the ASEAN countries have a long history. In fact, today ASEAN is the fourth largest trading partner for India. But this trade is uneven. Underlining this trade deficit, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Commerce said that Indian products and services need better market access in the 10-member bloc.
India's total trade in 2016-17 amounted to $660 billion. Of this, the trade between India and ASEAN accounted for $71.69 billion. This is 10.85% of India's overall trade. While total exports were $31.07 billion, imports stood at $40.63 billion. indicating an adverse trade balance of $9.56 billion. For the last 2 years, India suffered a trade deficit with 5 ASEAN member states: Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Brunei and Laos. Among all the ASEAN member states, India does maximum trade with Indonesia. It also suffers its biggest trade deficit with it. Under the existing trade agreement, Indonesia has eliminated tariffs on only 50% of the items it imports. All other ASEAN member states have committed to much more than this. This has resulted in India suffering its biggest trade deficit with Indonesia. India's worsening trade deficit with ASEAN countries is mainly on account of its imports of essential commodities like coal, petroleum and edible oils.
Boost it, having more interaction with their importers, having bioseller meet in India, reverse bioseller meet, having a display of products in that. And mainly in Asean, we must have our display center of the Indian exporters.
Time for a short break. Stay tuned for how India fares in its trade in agricultural products with ASEAN countries. Trade in agriculture is the key driver of rural prosperity and economic well-being. It is in this context that promotion to value addition to our agricultural products and commodities that enjoy competitive advantage in the ASEAN region will hugely benefit our farmers. It also makes a fit case for market access at zero duty.
India's principal exports to ASEAN countries are boneless meat, fish, groundnuts, sugar and cotton. In the last 2 years, Indian exports of agricultural and allied products to ASEAN countries have declined 24%. This decline is more marked in the case of groundnuts, which were a major item of export to Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia and Philippines. Moreover, some products are facing a stiff competition from China. For instance, Chinese peanut exports to Philippines enjoy zero duty benefit. In contrast, Philippines taxes India's exports at as much as 70%.
Everything depends on the relationship grows up with the exchange. Exchange means in commerce, import or export. We export other countries and we can import from the other countries. And in this way, the relationship grows up.
India also faces a problem of cheap tea coming in from China through the India-ASEAN Free Trade Area route. To prevent this, India needs to revisit the rules of origin provisions. This will stop Chinese exporters from taking advantage of lower tariffs under the Trade in Goods Agreement. There is a lot of scope in promoting tea exports to ASEAN countries, suitably tweaking the tariff structure that will also ensure a level playing field for India.
Their cash crops, rubber is freely imported, tea is imported, coffee is imported, this nutmeg is imported, all spices are imported. This cardamom is imported, this pepper is imported with a low import duty.
The ASEAN region is a mature oil-producing region. At the same time, it's also a net oil importer. Thanks to the strong economic growth that is driving up oil demand in the region. Not surprisingly, petroleum products top the list of the 10 major commodities exported from India to ASEAN. The government must provide all the help to the refineries to increase capacity and ensure tradable surplus with ASEAN nations.
In terms of emphasis on value chains vis-a-vis ASEAN countries. as several studies have shown, China's major economic growth happened because of their value chains with ASEAN countries. Whatever sector you pick up, be that leather, manufacturing, agriculture, you find that China could evolve, leverage the production ability, technology, scale of economies, strength of ASEAN countries.
Time for another quick break, but on the other side, India's trade in steel with the ASEAN members. Rising economic sector has made the ASEAN region a net importer of steel. As a result, many countries have expanded the capacities in the steel sector, particularly countries like Indonesia, Vietnam and Philippines. But the duty structure in the steel sector that is available to Japan and China is more favorable than what India has.
The existing India-ASEAN trade and goods agreement has put our steel industry at a disadvantage. With a 19% market share each, China and Japan are the major exporters to ASEAN. In comparison, India's 3% share is quite minuscule because of the present tariff structure. India should seek reciprocity and faster elimination of tariffs from all the major ASEAN countries.
The ASEAN countries had much more to gain from our tariff liberalization as a consequence of the FTA than we did vis-a-vis the ASEAN countries. Singapore, as you know, was already at more or less zero for most products. So, this kind of temporary imbalance will continue, and it of course is something which we will get compensated for when we have much greater trade flows in services.
India's limited space in the financial services in the ASEAN region is another area of concern. An aggressive approach by the Indian banks to establish banks and branches in the ASEAN region, either independently or in collaboration with domestic banks, would increase India's financial footprint and would also facilitate financial integration in the region.
Indian banks with subsidiaries in the ASEAN region include Bank SBI Indonesia, that has a 76% stake of State Bank of India, the PT Bank of India Indonesia with a 76% stake of Bank of India, and India International Bank in Malaysia with 40% stake of Bank of Baroda. Financial services will not only increase profitability and fundraising capacity, but will also stimulate Indian exports by providing vital commercial leads and opportunities. Cultural exchanges and tractive diplomacy are imperative in building mutual trust while strengthening the trade and commercial relationship with ASEAN. Cultural and geographical proximities of the Northeast region with ASEAN region are compelling factors to facilitate cultural relations between the Northeast and ASEAN countries. Initiatives like opening up consulate offices of ASEAN countries, relaxing visa requirements, and establishing cultural and educational centers could be taken up on priority.
We have MOUs for CEPs, the cultural exchange programs with the different countries, and especially more role comes with ASEAN countries, because we understand that the number of people coming as a tourist or cultural ambassadors are more from ASEAN countries.
Physical infrastructure including road, rail and air connectivity is a serious problem in the Northeast region. Given that this is a huge impediment in realizing its export potential, focusing on both inland and international waterways will go a long way in promoting trade and commerce with ASEAN nations. serious approach needs to be adopted where synergy between investment and services sector is considered. Also, investments with ASEAN countries could be promoted in order to gain maximum benefits.
A robust connectivity is imperative to realize the full potential of trade between India and ASEAN countries. And in this regard, Northeastern region is crucial because it can serve as a gateway to ASEAN countries through Myanmar and further to Cambodia, Thailand and Vietnam. The Act East policy should be more action-oriented towards ASEAN countries in particular and towards East Asia in general. Well, that's all we have for you in this edition. Thanks for watching.